I call to order this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Number 48 Governing Board. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Start with a roll call vote. For my far right, please.
Amy Carney,
Zach Lindsay.
Libby Hartwells, Karen Warner.
And I'm Julie Sinowski. All board members are present. We do have a quorum. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Hartwell seconds the motion. All in favor to approve the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. At this time, we are going to have our superintendent's comments. Dr. Menzel.
Well, good evening, President Snowski, Vice President Werner, members of the governing board. We do have a very full agenda tonight, so I will make my remarks brief, but I want to start by acknowledging that this week is National Assistant Principal Appreciation Week. So as you know, we have many assistant principals throughout our school district, and we're grateful for their unwavering and tireless support for our student success, and I want to express our appreciation from a leadership perspective for all the work of our assistant principals. This is also the week of the young child, and as you know, Scottsdale Unified School District operates preschool programs and pre-K programs, and we've this year have significantly expanded the number of our programs that are participating in the quality rating program through First Things First. So we want to acknowledge the work of our community ed department and all of our early childhood educators as they work to ensure our students are prepared as they enter kindergarten and then move through our system. Last Tuesday, we were able to host the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce board meeting at Echo Canyon. The Chamber has been rotating its board meetings to various member locations, and according to Chamber President Stanton, this was the first time we've held a meeting at a school, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. So thanks to Kat and her team, as well as our nutrition services team that catered the luncheon, I think it was a great experience for all involved. Last Friday, we hosted state legislators from LD 4 and 8, specifically Senator Marsh and Representatives Tarek and Hernandez, for a tour of Hohokam Elementary and Saguaro High School. We plan to do more of these in the future. Not everyone was available to attend that day, and so we recognize schedules can be complicated. And we also plan to do it for LD3 as well. We think there's no substitute for having our elected officials have an opportunity to get into our schools and see the great things that are happening with our students. On Saturday evening, I had an opportunity to attend the Celebration of Accomplished Teaching, a dinner that was held at Wild Horse Pass, recognizing new and renewed National Board Certified teachers. I want to thank Dr. Benson and Julie Sinowski for joining me to celebrate our SUSD teachers, several of whom were able to attend that evening. It was wonderful to be in a room with so many distinguished professional educators and to be part of a district that understands that NBC certification really is the gold standard in terms of reflecting professionals that care about their practice in a way that they spend the extra time to put their work to that level of scrutiny. So kudos to our National Board Certified teachers, and thanks to the governing board for continuing to support any teacher that wishes to go down that road here in this district. Tonight, there are two events that are happening that we cannot attend because we're here. One is the All Jazz Festival for Scottsdale being held at Scottsdale Community College. I tried to get out of this meeting so I could go, but I think I didn't have a choice. And the other is the IB art exhibit that's kicking off at Desert Mountain High School. That will run through April 24th, so people will still have an opportunity to experience that art exhibit. And I would strongly encourage all board members to take advantage of that opportunity. The reflection of our students as part of the exhibits, I think, makes it definitely worthwhile. And finally, I just wanted to announce that we will be holding a community town hall meeting on April 26th from 6 to 7 at Desert Mountain High School. Our plan going into next year is to hold one of these in each of the 5 learning communities, but we didn't want to wait till next year to do that. We wanted to get one under our belt. And so we've set April 26th to do that at Desert Mountain, and would invite anyone from our community to join us for that event. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks this evening.
Thank you for those remarks, Dr. Menzel. This time we are going to move into our information and discussion item portion of the meeting. Starting with 4A, our demographic study. Shannon Crozier.
Good evening, Board President Snowski, Vice President Warner, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, and guests. Tonight we have Mr. Rick Brammer here from Applied Economics. And Mr. Brammer and his team have done our demographic studies for us in the past. We did not do one last year, so we asked that they please do another one for this year to look at how things may have changed. And so he is here with his team to present what they found in the study.
Madam President, Madam Vice President, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, it's our privilege to be here tonight to present the results of our report. It's a 70-page report. They asked me to cut my presentation to 10 minutes because you have such a flow agenda. So I'm really going to hit the high points this time, but I'm always happy to come back if there are remaining questions, okay? So here we go. I just wanted to refresh everyone's memory about what we actually do. So a lot of what we do is examining enrollment trends, not only the total enrollment, obviously, but grade level distributions, and more importantly, geographic distributions, because it's not about what's happening in the district, it's about what's happening at the neighborhood level and working up, and one can be going up and one can be going down, so that's really important. And then also, for better or for worse, studying the enrollment patterns in the alternative providers, charters and private schools in the district. That's a big part of determining what your enrollment is going to be. The analysis of demographic characteristics really has to look at the aging or the non-aging of the existing population, the rate of turnover, the type of housing that's being added. And even though we're still building, we're building a lot of multifamily housing units that, as most of us know, aren't targeted to families with kids. And so we see construction, but you know, the school-age population actually continues to go down. And there's a limit to how far it'll go down, and maybe we'll talk about that just a little bit later. But you know, all those characteristics of the existing housing stock in the existing population, when you get to having 250,000 people you're dealing with, you know, what's going on with that population is more important than anything you can build, at least in a short period of time. So Taylor Shapiro from our office is here. She headed up the research on the development that is going on in the city, and I'm going to try to breeze through it, but she's here to answer any of the questions that you guys might have on what's going on out there, and there is a considerable amount. For you guys, we actually do 3 models. It's the only district I do 3 models for. I do a macroeconomic top-down, how does the whole district fit into the Northeast Valley, into Maricopa County, you know, economically, how do you behave? But because you're so different and so diverse, north to south, I've actually set up a sub-district model where I'm actually modeling the enrollment in each of your 5 communities. And really 6, because one of them is broken into 2 pieces. And that really improves the accuracy of our projections. And then we also do projections for these tiny little grid areas, and there's several hundred of them on this map, little squares you see. They're colored in this case by the community that they belong to. But that's actually the level of geography that we're doing our projections at and that we're tracking all the student enrollment at. The orange little dots you see all over this map are your students this year, both inside and outside the district and everywhere they reside, and completely off this map from Wickenburg to Florence. So, I mean, the dots go far and wide. The thing about the grid modeling is that attendance areas change, schools come and go, but the grids stay the same. So it gives us a fabric that we can use to do accurate sub-district projections as well. Starting back at the district level, we can see this is the blue bars are your 40th day head count enrollment over the last 22 years. The red line is the year-over-year % change. As you can see, enrollment here peaked back in about 2000 and then declined by about 1,200 students through 2010, mostly from aging, also from the advancement of charter schools. Since 2010, it declined by about 5,000 students, or about 19%. And that was exacerbated, of course, by the COVID year loss of 800. That put us on a little bit of a different trajectory, but we've been doing about an average loss of about 1.8% per year during that period. This breaks the same enrollment numbers down a little bit shorter period of time, but in this case, the blue bar is the enrollment from in the district, and the green bars are the enrollment from outside the district. And so all I really want you to come away with is the understanding that enrollment from outside the district has been very stable. It's been 4,500 year after year after year. And so the portion of enrollment that's declining is the blue bar, and that's the in-district enrollment. So as you can see, during this period of time when the district has lost 5,800 students, enrollment in charter schools within the district or within a mile of the district has increased by 5,700 students. So it's not awful hard to figure out, what happened to these to these kids. To your credit, you've been able to offset a lot of that by bringing in and maintaining a good number of students from outside the district, which allows you to maintain your facilities in case you ever need them again for all the students who might come back to those houses once the neighborhoods begin to turn over. We look at the enrollment by grade cohort, so it's the average enrollment in each grade. And as you can see, going back 20 years ago, the younger grades, or at least the 3rd to 5th grade group, 6th to 8th grade group, were similar in size to your high school groups. And what's happened since then with the aging of the population, the increasing housing prices, making the people who do move into the area much older and bringing with them older children, it's really set apart that 9-12 group. So now your high school enrollment is a lot bigger than your other grades. It's also been exacerbated by the fact that we see a lot of kids who go to charter school for K through 8 come back in 9th. So now we get this big bump between 8th and 9th grade, which throws another unknown essentially into the projections, particularly at the high school level. We look at the enrollment changes not only, of course, for the district, but for each of those little squares I was talking about. So on this map, over the last 5 years, anywhere where you see blue is a loss of enrollment, red is increasing enrollment, the white is plus or minus 5 students, which I consider to be no change, of course. So we're looking at, where it's increasing, where it's decreasing, and those community models I mentioned are picking up those characteristics. One of the things that's driven this decline in enrollment is we've been talking about is the share of the population that you're actually serving. So this little map we could probably spend about half a day on, but what it does is it compares, using census information, your enrollment to the school-aged population of each census tract. These are census tract areas. So the population aged 5 to 17 compared to your enrollment, and you see it as a ratio. So where you see above red, more than 80% of the school-aged persons in that census tract choose one of your schools. It may not be the school in their neighborhood, but they go to one of your schools. And you can see, the core of the district where that tends to be in the 60, 70, or more 80% range. But when you get further to the north, and particularly in the Kiva area and more affluent areas, you'll see those numbers fall. And it's because of the ability of those people to make choice. And there's a lot higher concentration of private school enrollment from those areas. So no matter what you did, you wouldn't be capturing as many as you would be in a lower socioeconomic neighborhood. And we've seen that hit, not only you, but up north in Cave Creek very, very hard, where the socioeconomics just don't lend themselves to public school enrollment. But anyway, like I said, all in all, it will show you're pretty much average overall in that regard. In terms of the actual demographics of the district, and then we'll just really quick, but what I'm looking at is the population under 18, falling from 18.4% to 15.5% over the last 12 years. That's a pretty steep decline. It is leveling right now. We're seeing birth rates level out a little bit, so we're hopeful that it's not going to fall too much further. But that group is very closely linked to the population, the households that are headed by persons aged 35 to 44 and 45 to 54, which is why they're highlighted down below. And you can see that group has been shrinking as well. In terms of the development side, there have been 14,000 housing units permitted in the last 10 years. 83% of them have been multifamily. I think this map shows the last 2 or 3 years worth of data, where these little green dots on this map are individual building permits. The little black dots are demolitions, where they're tearing down a house to build a house. And we see a whole lot of that in the Arcadia area and really up through the middle of the district as well. And then they don't look like much, but the little dots, the orange dots, where all these multifamily projects are going in. And the deceiving thing is that each one of those dots represents 300 or 400 dots, because of the number of units that are associated with those permits. But you can see it's been mostly concentrated to the south. However, we all know that up near the air park and so forth, we've seen plenty of those kind of additions go in. And as I said before, most of them have been very high end. And one of the areas that's really been impacted by that changeover is along McDowell Road. And one of the things that's holding down the enrollment in the Coronado community is that reinvigoration of the community, if you will, but being all the new song, bringing in all the new housing, all the new students, all the new retail, which is all great looking, but it also displaces families because it brings up rent prices. In terms of development potential, what we know about today, about 15,000 more housing units. And here it's colored, and I know it's harder than heck to see, but where you see yellow, that's where we can still build some single-family houses. Most of the potential, though, is tied up in these little tiny orange squares all over the place. And if we had time to scan around the map, Taylor could tell you one by one which projects those are and when they're likely to happen and approximately who they're targeted to. And a lot of that comes down to the price and the number of bedrooms. It's pretty easy to figure that one out. But and then there's going to be continued infill development and redevelopment in the Arcadia area. I can't even believe how much that has accelerated just in recent years. So when we turn to look at the projections, here's what we do, is that we're projecting the school-age population of the district, which is the green bars. So you see 10 years worth of history here, and then they're projected. School-age population has declined. It's going to continue to decline, not quite as fast as it has in the last 10 years. The blue bars are your enrollment numbers. And you can see those have declined a little faster, have shortened a little faster than school-age population because your service rate, the share of students you're serving, has declined slightly. Now, if we look at the ratio between your enrollment and your school-age population, Scottsdale has 73.7%. Ratio between the enrollment and the school-age population, which puts it behind some of the districts, especially the East Valley districts, where more traditional family structure, more traditional school structures, but they're in the 80s, those are the top. But you see there's plenty of districts that are struggling with this, that are well below the kind of service rate that you guys have been able to experience. The projections included in a continued decline, but at a much less rate. What we're seeing is the charter schools are saturating their own market. So it went along and it went along and it went along, and now they've stopped growing too, just for the same reasons you have. There's just not as many more kids out there. So that's probably a good thing. It's going to help stabilize our enrollment. If you look at the sub-district numbers, and in avoiding putting up tens of thousands of numbers for you to look at, I just did the enrollment in each one of the communities, how it's likely to trend here. And with the exception of the Saguaro area and really to the Arcadia area, there's some decline there because they have a shrinking high school class. We had 500 freshmen 3 years ago. This year we got 388. So all of a sudden that's contracting, and most of the decline should be in the near term, and then it levels again. Whereas places like Desert Mountain, we know have continued aging that's going to take place in that community. And with the ones like Chaparral runs up and Chaparral runs down, and right now the overall decline is, trend is down, but not by very much. That's a real solid, recurring family type of neighborhood, especially the southern part of it, of course. So the conclusions that we have tonight are, we do think K-12 enrollment is probably going to continue to decline. Not very much, and that amount is going to be determined by the level of competition. We don't see any potential for a large-scale increase in school-age population anytime soon. Populations do only age to a point, and then we call it, regeneration of neighborhoods. But it happens so slowly, and at this price level, I'm afraid it's still not going to give us very many, especially little kids. Taylor tells me housing construction is going to be steady during the projection period, but as it has been, it's mostly multifamily and it's mostly expensive. However, with interest rates hovering at 6 to 7%, my personal opinion is we're going to see some kids in some of these multifamily projects, at least temporarily, until interest rates come back down and people are able to do something different. So we're going to monitor that situation really closely, because that's just a kind of a no-brainer. That's what happens. So we see, continued declines are likely in the Coronado and Desert Mountain areas, with the other three really being fairly stable. So I hope I didn't go over too much. I tried. So be happy to take any questions that you all might have.
Governing board members, do you have any questions right now on all this information? Dr. Hartwells? Okay, Vice President Werner.
So I think, this was great presentation, great information, and thank you for presenting today. I did a little polling in my own neighborhood, and I think it's a little bit foolish to think that it's all the aging population and so on, that's why we're declining in enrollment. And as you said, 5,800 of decline, and then the charter's got 5,700. So I think we need to really take a look at what are we doing that we're not capturing some of that, the kids that are going to the charters and the private schools. So in my neighborhood, only 1 of 5 families attend public school. The rest go to charters, private, faith-based, and so on. And, we really have to take a hard look at the product that we're putting out as well. And I'm proud of our schools and our staff, but there's definitely breakdowns along the way, so that we can't just blame the aging population and the interest rates and all of that, because we do have a lot of families that would love to send their kids to the schools, but they're not because of the product that's being put out.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think one of the things we did last year when we were doing those boundary adjustments for reopening the school is that we were looking at how many children chose their own school. And you start looking at these neighborhoods, and within an individual grid like this big, you'd have students going to 10 different Scottsdale schools. They're probably going to charters in other places too, but they're going to 10 different Scottsdale schools. And what bothers me about that is that if you're not all together going, you lose that sense of community that makes a neighborhood school desirable. So I think I'm singing the same song you are. It's just that, it's I don't know how you change that around, but, to get people back behind their neighborhood school. But I see that completely has kind of fallen apart.
It is really sad, because I think that most kids do want to go to their neighborhood school, and so it's something for us to work on. So
It definitely gives you room to grow, too.
Dr. Hartwells?
Thank you, President Snowski. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Brummer, and it's nice to see you back.
Yeah,
A
nice to
couple
see you.
years ago. Not a whole lot's changed in the analysis. I would actually like to talk a little bit about the analytics themselves, if we could. So as you noted, you do a macro analysis, and then you divide the district up, the learning communities, and then one subbed into 2, correct? So
I'm
there's
sorry,
some-
what?
So you have the macro analysis of the
Right.
district, which you're reporting those numbers.
Right.
But there's some underpinning of these, you're calling them sub-districts, which are the learning
Communities,
communities.
and
We
the
call them
report
learning communities.
details projections for each community.
So some of the findings that are being reported, though, don't seem to, or to me, I don't know, what is the algorithmic basis for these analyses in each one of these sub-districts? Are they the same? How are you projecting?
It's fundamentally the same, but you're dealing with such different demographic characteristics of the people who are in each one of those areas. So the age structure of the households and owner versus renter and all those characteristics are different from sub-area to sub-area.
So algebraically, are those all equal weighted factors?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I mean, the most heavily weighted factor is historic enrollment. I mean, that's what we're doing is we're tracking enrollment over time, and it's a small area. And so that's the most predominant factor. However, we're looking at all the changes in the demographic structure in order to say, well, how is that likely to change? And what makes it even more complicated and a little harder to follow is that we're projecting on a geographic basis, on those grids, and on attendance areas, right? And all the numbers you want to see and they want to see are by school. And so what we didn't talk about at all tonight is the massive, exchange there is, the movement of students, like I was talking about, where only, 2/3 or 3/4 of the students at the most, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, go to the school we think they should go to. So even when you do the sub-district analysis, it still doesn't mean they're all going to choose to go to that school.
I understand that. What I'm trying to get to is the quantitation of the qualitative factors. When you
Right.
look at all this myriad factors
Right.
in each of the sub-districts, are you assigning equal weighting to these factors in each of the districts as if they are a monolith? Each district is a stamped equivalent of the next?
No, I mean, the factors are weighted differently. And
They are
like I said,
weighted
it's historic enrollment, it's share of population in those two key age groups, it's owner versus renter, and it's residents.
housing. Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly
Okay.
right.
Okay, good, thank you. And so when you then knit everything together as was presented here as a district, kind of big picture, as opposed to the sub-data, and those are all, or in some way, weighted distributions that are unique for the sub-district, how are you then knitting that together at the macro level to give us a district number?
I run both
That-
models completely, actually all three models completely independently. And then really analyze the results and adjust them back to say the same thing.
Just
Sorry.
the same thing, okay. Well, so my concern is, so for example, taking two pieces out of your presentation. So we have SUSD noted has over the time period since 2000 lost around 5,800 students or enrollment.
Right.
And that just assumes all factors being equal over the course of those years, which of course is not true, right?
Right,
And then
it's just a number.
in the converse, you had stated that charter schools, which I'm sure the high-level numbers do say this, have increased by 5,700. And then your conclusion or suggestion was that, well, all these kids just went over to charter schools. And so my concern is that that is a gross oversimplification of what's happening, because what the district finds in exit surveys primarily is that families leave because they are geographically relocating.
Oh, true.
They are
And
not
all we're trying to
just going down
do
the
is show
street.
how the net works out.
Yeah.
You're absolutely true.
Okay. So I just,
It's
I
not
want to be.
intended to indicate that it's
Yeah,
the same
I just want to be
kids.
very careful that we do not assign motivations to these numbers, because I don't think you can. They're just more complex and more nuanced. So we
Right.
can't make those associations and draw those conclusions. I also wanted to just point out, and you did state this, and that is, in the last 2 years, charter schools have actually declined. The local charter school enrollments have declined. And I think that that also is a much more complicated analysis. We shouldn't assign why, right? So I don't necessarily, again, I'm back to that, let's be careful with the impression we're going to leave on the community and our takeaways from this data, that there aren't broad strokes reasons here. These are numbers, as you said, they're numbers, and there are estimates, and there are projections where there's a lot of assumptions underpinning those numbers and
And some big
projections.
macro ones, including the fact that the state demographer shows no increase in the population under 18 statewide until after 2030. So any place that's got growing enrollment right now is doing it at someone else's expense.
Yeah. And I actually, if I recall correctly, and you probably remember this more specifically than I, the last demographic study that the city of Scottsdale was involved in, which was in the last year or so, showed that Scottsdale was one of the very few cities in the state of Arizona who the average age increased. Right, and that isn't necessarily anything the district's going to change.
No, that's completely out of your
Yeah, our
control.
friends in the city need to be paying attention to that data. Yeah, and
True.
it certainly would help us.
Well, and the affordable housing issue obviously
Absolutely.
just stands out in front of everything, so.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to.
No, it's great.
I'm a numbers person, and so I want to be very careful on what we're really drawing conclusions from the demographic study.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Any other comments from governing board members? No? Okay. You'd mentioned, thank you, by the way, for bringing this to us again. It's a lot to look through.
It is.
And attempt to try to make some sense of without jumping to conclusions, as both comments alluded to tonight. So the motivation and the changes that we see and continue to see, they're challenging to summarize. And one thing that I was looking for and hoping, just from the study of this, the demographic enrollment analysis for our district, was the impact, because it says applied economics. So I was hoping there was going to be some economic pathway between what we see in our district and how that influences our community, our greater community at large. Impact on business success, impact on property values, how all of this information could potentially impact that. You had mentioned the community schools, and I agree that, people might choose a different education venue for various reasons, and we can't assume what those reasons are, no matter how formal or informal our surveys are, unless you're going door to door and asking every single household the same questions, which is not practical.
No.
So have you found over time the economic influence in the value of district public schools? I see a head nodding. I'd love to learn more about that, if you have.
I mean, he's going to be better at answering, but I did go to a meeting recently
Can you go
that
up to the
said,
microphone? Thank you.
that was saying their big product right now is build for rent, single-family homes. They're growing rapidly in the Valley specifically, and they said that better school districts, better schools are leading that kind of development. So I think it does have an impact, and there's obviously a lot more to research on how it could affect the greater community.
And in terms of the economics, particularly in the housing analysis, there's quite a section in there about projected population growth and some of the employment numbers that are behind it. What you lose in a metropolitan area is the link, essentially, with all the commuting that goes on, and the workforce that goes in and out of Scottsdale is staggering, to be quite honest. And people bring their kids with them to work sometimes too, so it works actually both ways.
Sure.
People take kids in and they take them out, and so I think to directly link your enrollment to any particular economic factor other than the county is overall growing or it's not growing is a little bit of a reach. But we certainly do track all the residential and non-residential projects. We're, looking at the impact that SkySong has, on a neighborhood, even though it's not particularly residential. We see what it's done to the area around it. So I think at that level, we certainly do.
Okay, thank you, Taylor and Rick. Appreciate your information that you've shared with us tonight. And I think all governing board members realize they can reach out if they have
Absolutely.
additional questions.
Absolutely
All right,
right.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
We will move on to our safety and security update and discussion by Mr. Friedman. That's 4B on our agenda.
Good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Werner, and board members, Dr. Menzel. We're going to do a broad overview update of the current safety and security status in the district. Tonight, we're going to cover some of the staffing, the electronic security measures, some of the accomplishments we've made thus far this year, and in general, and then some upcoming projects that are going on. So with staffing, we started this year with 14 vacancies out of our 30 security officers. The board graciously approved the 12-month positions for all security, and within a couple months, we had filled all remaining positions, so we had a full security staff. We currently have one vacancy, somebody that left. but we are actively recruiting and doing interviews to get us back up to full staffing. The board also approved a half-time administrative assistant for security. We share that with communications. And they also cover the conference center lobby here, which allows for people to sign in and sign out during the day and creates the security atmosphere that we have on our campuses for our staff that come down here to the training facility itself. And then I believe it was last meeting or maybe 2 meetings ago, you approved the emergency management program supervisor. We have held first round of interviews and are working to fill that position as quickly as possible. So staffing has been moving in the right direction. We have currently, like I said, almost all of our positions filled. So when it comes to the electronic security measures, we have closed circuit cameras. We currently have more than 12,000 in the district. We have put together a future plan for expansion and refurbishment. As you all know, electronics are outdated pretty much the minute that you get them. So we put a plan in place to start refurbishing our cameras and replacing them as we go forward, so that it will be a consistent program. We've got a 5-year refurbishment plan, replacement plan based on our current numbers. We will also be adding another cameras as we move forward. We're at a district level looking to add 100 cameras a year for the next 5 years till we top out with cameras. So all of these have allowed us to plan for the future, both budgeting and also where the placement will be of cameras and stuff. And we're also doing it at a district level instead of the sites individually asking for them. When it comes to card access, we currently have over 600 doors that are card access. We are also looking at expanding that and the functions of that. And as far as the expansion goes, some of the schools were not consistent in anything because as some of the schools were rebuilt or redone, we've added card readers to locations. So we currently have 2 of our high schools that were done. The other 3 are slated for coming budget years. So it just depends. So there is no like pattern, but we have looked at it, and over the next 5 years, we'll be doing the expansion to create the card access for all the schools to a minimum level that is will be district wide. Lockdown alerting, we have lockdown systems on all of our campuses. Every active campus has it, and some of the staff buildings as well. These systems will allow an immediate lockdown, not only the notification, but also of the doors themselves. And we are able to, like I said, all of the campuses have the system currently activated. One of the new enhancements this year is we added a 24-hour security number that is a single number that anybody in the district can call, and it will roll after hours to various people until it gets answered. So in the past, one of the challenges that I heard when I started was if it was between this time and this time, you called your administrator first, and then you called the security director, and you had to remember all these numbers. This year, with the help of the IT department, we were able to get a single number that will roll appropriately based on who's on vacation or whatever else. We did some command center enhancements. The old e-coach that used to be the old command vehicle that the district used in the event of an emergency had met its lifespan and was put out to pasture. So we have purchased we've actually reused some equipment that we've had and made it better to be able to use it to create a command center that's portable that we can put wherever we need it. It includes TVs and computers to be able to watch cameras, to be able to Teams and have communication within the district. And then we're also working on, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, enhancing our communication in terms of radios and things like that. And our last security measure for this section is magnetic wands. These are like you've seen when you go into any sporting events or so forth. We do not do random searches with them. We're not searching kids as they come into campus. These aid in the searches for the administration and security team when they've already identified a child or somebody on campus that may have a weapon, a vape, or some type of contraband on them. Instead of making them dump all their pockets and everything else, we can now have them stand and search them without touching them using the wand. And then we usually give them the opportunity to place whatever they determine is there on the table, as opposed to us having to, in the past, remove your jacket, we search the pockets, pull out your pockets, all that kind of stuff. We don't have to do that. It's less invasive. And it also saves us a lot of time. So some of our accomplishments, this year we rolled out Dig It, which was our safety motto. We started it with it in the beginning of the year. Dig It stands for doors, identifications, gates, and IT passwords. We'll start with the doors. The doors, we've done 2 surveys now across the district, where we've had security staff go and literally tug on every classroom door and see which doors are open and which doors are locked. It's not announced, it's random, it's just we go do it. And 78% of the doors on the average for the entire district, elementary all the way through high school, have been locked or have the magnets in place where the door is actually locked but able to open so the students can get in and out during class. And one of the side effects we've heard from a lot of the principals is because the doors are locked, the hallways are clear more often because the students don't want to be marked tardy or have to bang on the door to get in. So especially at some of the middle schools, the principals have told us that one of the unintended consequences, their kids are getting to class on time because they don't want to get caught in the halls. Gates are locked on campus. We know this because we've had my phone rings after hours because people have been locked in. My favorite is that Phoenix Police has been locked in our campuses at least twice. They were doing paperwork on the campus and couldn't get out. So we're doing much better with locking gates. I don't have statistics on that, but we have been going around and checking. And our 2 main violators at the beginning of the year, the 2 of our high schools, those gates have been locked religiously, and the administration is following up on that. So it's good to see. We also implemented identification cards being worn by students 2nd grade and up. We do have a lot of our schools that are doing it from even younger than 2nd grade, but we told them that we'd like it 2nd grade and up, and that's working out well. It's always a challenge at our high schools because the kids, it doesn't match their clothes this day, or we can come up with any reasons that you want. But they definitely have seen an increase. They're definitely not coming onto campus without having an ID card. They may take it off during the day, but they're always getting onto campus without their ID card. The October lockdown exercise, so we did that October 1st. We did an exercise with our partners from Scottsdale Police, Scottsdale Fire, Phoenix Police, Phoenix Fire, Paradise Valley, the Sheriff's Office, DPS was there. And then we invited, we had almost 100 participants from the district itself, and we did a full-scale lockdown exercise where we had a scenario that was planned for roughly a 2-hour time frame where parents would be in classrooms pretending the role of students, people would be teaching, and we would have the bad actors come onto campus and pretend to be active shooters. The exercise went well. That was right after the governing board had signed the partnership papers with Scottsdale Police to allow them access to our cameras. The person in the real-time crime center who monitors our cameras in an incident had only had 1 day of training on our cameras and did such a great job that within 12 minutes, the scenario is supposed to last 2 hours, but within 12 minutes we had neutralized all 3 of the bad guys, and of the 50 some odd people that we had put fake injuries on, more than half of them never even saw the bad guys. So it was a huge testament to the cameras, to the access that we did, and to the partnership that we have with all of our public safety friends. It was also a way for us to give parents an opportunity to see and understand what a lockdown is when it occurs on campus. And we're working through more of that because, as you all know, when we went to school, there were no lockdown drills. We may have had tornado drills, you may have had evacuation drills, but not all of us experienced lockdown. So a lot of parents have asked, how do I explain it or help talk to my kids about it? So this was one way that we could do this, is give them an opportunity to experience it, to be able to talk to their children about it. We are planning on doing this again next year. We had a partnership with CVS when they shut down all their COVID kiosks that were in their parking lots. We partnered with the city of Phoenix and a private entity, and we were able to get 9 of those kiosks donated to the district that the board accepted during gifts. We also, we're going to use those for offices at our high school football stadium so that if we have to deal with somebody at a game, instead of having to walk them all the way, sometimes a distance over to an office in the school, we now will have a portable office that's right out at the field. It will be just for security and the police officers. We'll be able to store some extra medical gear in there for the nurses, trainers, and or if the fire department has to come out. We also were able to get traffic cones and barriers and some other stuff that CVS was going to get rid of. The good thing is it was free to us. It was going to cost them over $6,000 to dispose of each one of these, and they would sit in the landfill forever. So we reappropriated with them. We were the first group to get it from them, and now they've taken them across the entire country to get rid of them that way. So kudos to us for starting that. We created new regulation signage across the district, so we're in the process. The signs are here. I was going to bring one in. I'll have one for later in the meeting. But we have new signage that is going on all the campuses. It will be a uniform sign that gives all the regulations from no alcohol, no trespassing, and all of those. It will be a uniform sign that has a district logo. It will be on every campus. We've gotten the locations of where those approved by not only our legal team, but by the city's legal teams, for all the jurisdictions so that they are enforceable, whether it comes to no trespassing, whether it comes to the drug-free zone and all of that. And so we're in the process of putting those up and cleaning up all the random signs that have been across the district for the years. And then we worked with the Red Cross. We renewed all the agreements for our sheltering. Should there ever be a disaster, our schools, especially after hours and on the weekends, are slated for shelters for the Red Cross, should they need it. So every so many years, we have to go through and redo those, and this was one of those years. We were actually a few years late, but with COVID and stuff, they put them off. So that has been redone, and then the city, every 2 years, or I'm sorry, every 5 years, you're supposed to redo the crosswalk agreements with the city. They prefer to do it more often than that. Ours hadn't been done in quite some time due to a number of different reasons, but they are all updated now. And I just, as I explained to Dr. Hartwells earlier, just literally got them back right before the meeting from the city with all the signatures. So I'll be sending those to you all to look at. In the beginning of the year, we started out with the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center. The ACTIC was going to do a survey of all of our campuses for threat and vulnerability assessments. They have all been completed. All 29 of our campuses have been done, and we'll discuss more about that a little bit later. We implemented a no bag, clear bag policy or guidance at all of our high school and middle schools for sporting events. In the fall, we rolled it out to the high schools, and then after winter break, we rolled it out to the middle schools. We're not doing all events. We're doing anything in the stadiums at the high schools and anything indoors, so in the gymnasiums. We sent all of our staff to Alice, all the security leads to the Alice Train the Trainer. Alice stands for, and I never get it right, so I'm going to read it. Alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. And that is one of 2 of the methods. Scottsdale Police does not use the Alice method, so we don't because most of our schools are in Scottsdale. But all of our security leads have been trained in it because we do a kind of a hybrid between the run, hide, fight and the Alice method, which is satisfies both because Phoenix PD does the Alice method. So we kind of do our own hybrid to be able to blend with all of our partners. One of the things that I did since I've been here is I've had a collaboration with our special education folks and our student services. We found that as our security teams are meeting with the students for good or bad reasons, lots of times they are involved with either student services for 504 plans or counseling or stuff like that. And on the flip side, there's a lot of them that are involved with special ed for IEPs or other things. So I meet regularly with both of those departments to kind of talk about which students we're seeing issues with, so that hopefully and they bring stuff to me so that we can alert the security teams on the campuses. So hopefully that we break down the walls and keep the collaboration going in order to better serve all the students. We've also been doing quarterly meetings with all police agency supervisors. So as you all know, we cover 3 jurisdictions. So I meet regularly each quarter with the Scottsdale Police Sergeant over the SROs, the Phoenix Police Sergeant over the SROs, and Paradise Valley Police Department Sergeant. And occasionally they bring the lieutenants. We've had some of the chiefs meet with us as well. So it's a way to keep the open communication and make sure that whether we're in the Arcadia complex, which is basically Phoenix, or Scottsdale, or the 2 Paradise Valley schools, that at least all of the police agencies and the expectations are all the same, and that we're addressing issues across the board with all of them. So upcoming projects, policy IAHMD, which is training in suicide prevention, and part of that is the safe storage of firearms. We are working on fulfilling that policy, which requires us to provide education on safe storage of firearms to all students in all grades every year. We created a script that one of the requirements is that the class, I guess, be taught by current or former police officers. So I'm partnering with Scottsdale Police Department to put together the classes. We wrote a script. It's now at their leadership to approve what we're going to be talking about. Hope to get that back in the next week or so, and then we can move forward with the training on that. We're also working with several other things, including getting the message out as part of this that the police departments will issue gun locks for families that need them. They are free of charge, and that'll be part of this education material. And we're also talking about some of the other items that are available on our websites. When it comes to safe storage, we're also looking, because it has to be age appropriate, you can talk about some of the stuff with the high schools. A lot of the lessons we're doing for the younger kids are going to be more of tool versus toy, and what to do when you find a tool versus a toy, so that we can talk about how to store it and how not to pick it up and things like that. Hopefully the message will resonate with the kids, but also be something they can take home to their parents. One of our next big projects is the radio system upgrade. I believe it's on the agenda for later tonight. Our radio system has not been upgraded in 20 years. We are looking to go to a new radio system. The biggest benefit of this radio system is the entire district will be on one system. So we'll be able to talk from campus to campus. We'll be able to talk directly with the police officers as they're responding to it. We'll be able to talk to the buses and transportation. Currently, everybody's on their own system. This will bring us all under one system together. Bus ridership tracking is coming. It's been a huge task for our transportation department, but this is, we're starting to roll out a way to basically a child will scan onto a bus, so we know when they got on. They'll scan to get off the bus, and we'll be able to know where they got off, and it'll have real-time data. It won't say that if you scan and you don't belong in that bus, it doesn't mean you can't get on. It just means you're going home with a friend today, but it'll alert the driver that, hey, this is not a regular person on your route. So again, the board approved the funding to do a temporary trial this next month, I hope. Shannon's crossing her fingers over there because we're moving forward quickly. But that'll be a huge benefit to the district. I know in that first couple months of school, my first couple months here, it was every couple weeks it seemed like every day we were looking for a kid that either went home with a friend or got off at the wrong stop or the parent missed them, so this will hopefully help with that. One of the other projects is security statistics tracking. Currently, I think we're the last in the district to go digital. We are archaic in the security world. We're still, Chuck over there sits at home at night for me and reads reports and puts tick boxes on an Excel spreadsheet and then gives me stats once a week so that we know where we're at. So hopefully we'll move into the digital world here soon and be able to do that and save him some hours. Complex leads. The district has always had a leader on the high school campuses. We have a security team at each of the high school campuses that is more than one person. And so we've had a a lead at each of those schools. This year we expanded that and made them complex leads, and that means that they're not only responsible for the high school, but they're also responsible for the security personnel at the middle school and anything that happens at the elementary schools. So this has allowed us to have a better perspective of the students that are coming from elementary to middle to high, all with the same team. They're familiar with them, they're working for it. It does also currently have one supervisor with Chuck, and we'll get a second when we get the emergency manager supervisor. But it's still 5 complexes and 30 some odd people spread across the whole district that are dealing with sometimes incidents that need immediate supervision to help assist them. So by putting a lead in charge of the complex, it's helped us with managing that. I'd love to go to 24-hour in-house security coverage for all of our campuses. That means 33 new positions, but that's a big lift right now and a big ask. But there are a lot of benefits for it, and we'll go into more of that during the executive session a little bit later. We're currently developing a security training academy. We have asked, since I've come on board, our security team to do a lot more things. So we are going to retrain them all in a security academy. I've got members of my security team that are helping develop the curriculum. And so we'll get them all retrained. Part of the benefit of having them 12 months is that we have the time in the summer to do this training and make them a better team. We've updated the incident command training and structure for the district. Before the end of the year, we'll be holding an ICS 300 class, which is Advanced Incident Command Structure. That will be for all the people that will be part of the district ICS team. This will allow us to better function as a team and understand roles. When you have an ICS team, while Dr. Menzel is the boss every day, he may not be a boss on an incident because he's giving policy decisions and somebody else may be making the intermediate decisions. So the roles in ICS are different, and part of the ICS 300 class will allow us, and it's going to be an in-house class that the City of Scottsdale Emergency Manager is going to teach for us, along with somebody from the state, to allow us to have our own discussions and facilitate and work together as a team. So there won't be any outside persons in the class, it'll only be internal, so we can gear everything towards the school district and what we see in reality and how we actually work. And one of the beauty of ICS is that it's not just a one and done. We can massage it how it works best for us as a district. That's all I got for now. Unless you have questions, we'll do more in exec session.
Governing board members, who has questions? First light on, Ms. Carney.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Friedman, for that presentation. I think school security and safety is a priority for all of us. I'm wanting to know, I didn't hear anything about the addition of SROs, school resource officers. I know we currently have 11, and only full-time on our high school campuses, right? Can you tell us any more about hiring more school resource officers? Because that's something I keep hearing from parents that they want.
President Sanowski, Vice President Warner, Board Member Carney, everybody else. The SROs are not our employees. I'll start with that. The SROs are police officers of the 3 different jurisdictions that that serve us. We currently have SROs at all 5 high schools and at our middle schools. And the middle school SROs cover our elementary schools as well. And I say that's where their assignment is, but basically if I have an incident at an elementary school, the closest SRO goes. So if a high school SRO is closer, they'll go as opposed to the middle school. But for your everyday teaching and hanging out with the kids and being a visible presence on campus, it's typically the middle school SROs that go down and help with the elementary schools. Now, as far as getting more, I've spoken to all 3 of the police chiefs, and currently they cannot give us any more bodies. They are hoping that by this time next year, they will have enough staff themselves to be able to start pushing bodies our direction. And what I mean by that is during the COVID era and the police, the protest movements and stuff like that, police numbers dwindled tremendously. And so they are just trying to fill their own positions, patrol positions and stuff like that now. They have said they've seen the increase, so it's starting to turn around, but currently we could, as he said, you could give us $1 million and tell us it's for a police officer. They could not give us the officers. They just don't have the bodies. It takes them about a year to train somebody, and the SRO is not a rookie position. It's a position that typically a seasoned officer or somebody that has been on a few years applies for and gets into. So they are hoping that by this time next year, they'll be able to get us, start sending some officers our way. They have also spoken with other schools within, and Scottsdale specifically, Notre Dame and some of the Paradise Valley schools that are in Scottsdale have asked for officers. Phoenix Union took officers out of their schools a couple years ago, and now they're ready to put them back. So when they start getting into being able to fill those positions and give us back officers, where we sit on that pecking list, I'm not sure, because everybody wants them and everybody should get them, but getting them is a new story.
Okay. One last question for you. So I know we're a current grantee of the School Safety Program grant currently, and I know that for this past school year, we put the money toward social workers and not SROs. And I'm wondering, did we apply for this grant for any of the school sites for this upcoming school year?
President Sanowski, Board Member Carney, I know that we are applying for them. We are not, we made a decision to not apply for the SROs at this time because the grant requires, the due date for the grant is April 15th, and the grant requires that the officers start day one. So that would be basically September or August when we start school. And the requirements for those grants require that they spend so much time in the classroom teaching each month. It also requires that they meet certain criteria throughout each month of the school year. Because all of the police chiefs have said that they cannot fill those positions until possibly this time next year, we felt it would be better to apply for that grant, but reapply for the social workers that are also on the same grant, because we know we can get those and fill those spots where we're not sure. We've been told from our police chiefs that that is not a reality expectation from them at this point.
Okay, so we will be applying for that grant for social workers before April 15th.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Vice President Werner?
So I've also had some conversations with some police officers, and this is definitely an area that I think that we need to do everything that we can to get an armed police officer on all of our campuses, just because of the times that we live in. And one of the things, from a business perspective, sometimes you want to get something that you can, because it then allows another opportunity for growth in the police departments, and they can shuffle some people around. So it's disappointing that we did not apply for that, and we've gone the direction we have, because I think that is due to just the incident that happened here just over a couple weeks ago here. I'm not really sure that our schools are prepared if something like that was to happen here, and hopefully it never will, but we definitely want to be prepared for that. Are there any of the cities, like Paradise Valley is pretty small, are they able to fill those schools now? There's 2 schools.
Paradise Valley, when I spoke with the Paradise Valley Police Chief, he has said that there is a possibility that they could hire somebody to fill that role. His challenge is that the timing is off, because they would not be ready. Even if we gave them the money today, we would not be able to meet the grant requirements of having somebody in the classroom on day one and meet the education requirements there's an acronym for it that I don't remember, that they have to teach in the classrooms each month and meet certain. So that was why we decided that we couldn't even apply right now for it.
And then what is the criteria that they have to teach in the classroom?
Law-related education.
awesome. So it's a positive. I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
Like, we want, we want that.
We
Yeah.
want it. It's, if you didn't hear Dr. Sakos,
Yeah.
it's law-related education that the police officers have to teach in the classroom. Sorry, thank you.
All right, well, I appreciate your presentation today. It's really great, and I'm excited to hear more in our executive session. And I am a staunch supporter in getting the safety grant and to have SROs on our campuses. Thank you.
Dr. Hartwells.
Thank you, Board President Sinowski. Thank you, Josh, for the presentation and all the hard work that you have put in over the last year. I think people don't remember maybe that you are still, are you even here a year yet?
No,
No, see? He's on fire. right?
exactly 8 months and 28 days, if you're
See?
counting.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. Thank you. A couple of just points. The upcoming projects, when you mentioned policy IAHMD, the firearm storage, I just want to be very clear to the community. It's safe storage of firearms is the provision in the policy. And it also has restrictions on the type of curriculum, so to speak, that you referred to, that you're vetting out with the Scottsdale police, that you can, so you mentioned toy versus, I guess, threat or something. But there cannot be any firearms or any kind of simulations of firearms presented to the kids
That's correct.
by policy. And I
That's
wanted to
correct.
make sure that our parents know that. That's not the type of education we're talking about. And that policy is directed to suicide prevention because as of 2020, firearm-related injuries are the #1 cause of death of children and adolescents. So this is, and the police support gun locks and safe storage because it works. So I just wanted to clarify that because I think the way that it's presented on the slide, and you have a lot on your slide, so I get it, you can't put it all on there. Just want to make sure that there was some nuance I felt like was missing in the slide. And I think that was, the other question I wanted, my recollection on this, the grants that are being referred to here, when I had a conversation, this was when James, before you came on board, and one of the SROs and one of our learning communities, actually 2 of them, about the grants that are available from the state. They did not want us to get funding from the state because it would restrict the ability, which you just listed as a benefit, which was they'd have to be dedicated to a certain school. And they wouldn't be able to respond, let's say if you're a Mountainside, you wouldn't be able to go down the street to Laguna because that grant, the terms of the grant, I remember reading the terms of the grant. There's a laundry list of restrictions on the grant. And one of them is a dedicated school. And so that plasticity, that flexibility that we now have with our SROs would not be available. Do you recall that? This was before you came on board, so out of fairness, I
Yeah.
didn't give you a heads up on this, so sorry.
No, President Sinowski, Dr. Hartwells, yes, I do know, but there's also a stipulation, I don't know if it's new this year or whatever, where you can apply for multi-campus, which is
Okay,
one
then
of the
that's
things.
new.
One of the things we were looking at. It still has similar restrictions. They have
Okay.
they have to have a primary campus, but they are eligible to go and assist at other campuses. But, so I don't know if they got more lenient, or how they rewrote it, but we did look at the multi-campus because that's what we would be looking for, is somebody that will have a primary campus but is able to assist at all of our campuses.
Yeah, so that was the reason that I was given that the state funding wasn't sought in the past, was because it would restrict the ability for predominantly the Scottsdale police, who we, predominantly work for. They were not keen on that because it would just hinder their ability to collaborate appropriately. So I just wanted to add that color because I think that was maybe it's a fact pattern that's changed, but that was certainly the reason we were not doing it in the past. Thanks.
Dr. Menzel.
I just want to say thank you, Josh, and to our security staff. I see many in the room here. What has been accomplished in 8 months is pretty significant, and we have amazing partners with law enforcement in our 3 jurisdictions, along with our dedicated staff. And what we've learned through Dig-It and all the rest is that it's not just one person's responsibility, it's all of our responsibility. So if we see something, say something, don't assume anything, because the safety and well-being of our students and staff is the responsibility of everyone in the room, everyone on our campuses, and you can see the progress that we've made over time. And I just want to express my deep appreciation because I know you and your team have put in countless hours, a lot of sleepless nights. I thought that 24-hour number just went to you, so good to know that you share that. But I'm grateful, and I just want to make that public.
And Dr. Menzel, I appreciate you bringing in that community element, because I was going to ask Mr. Friedman, and I know we have our security, much of our security team here this evening. What are the primary things that you think, how the community can help support the security of our campus? But I think Dr. Menzel mentioned that, and that is see something, say something. If there's a gate that's unlocked, report it, lock it, whatever. It does take that village. And we know that fences and locked doors can only do so much to keep our schools safe. So it's important that we do value the learning institutions as being safe and peaceful places in our community, and that all community members recognize that as well. So whether it's on our fields and extracurricular, co-curricular, it's sun up to sundown and beyond, right? So you talk about that 24-hour. I think we're moving in the right direction, and I appreciate all the work that you all have done in the last year to 8 months as well. So thank you. And I think that's it. We will move on to 4C, possible maintenance and operations override election for November 7th, 2023. Shannon Crozier.
Yes, good evening, Board President Snowski, Vice President Warner, members of the board, Dr. Menzel and guest. Tonight is just an information item as to a possible M&O override continuation. So we'll just kind of be looking at what that looks like, what our current M&O override is. Right now, we have a 15% M&O override for the district that was approved in November of 2019. M&O overrides are a little bit different than capital or district additional assistance overrides, and that in a capital override, once it's passed, it's good for 7 years, and there's no phase-up time in that. With an M&O override, it's also good for 7 years, but at year 5, it either needs to be renewed or they start a phase-out process. And the whole idea of that is that if the override was not to be renewed, it wouldn't be an immediate, in our case, $21.5 million cut in 1 year. So we are to the point where we're looking at getting to that 5-year phase. And so we, like I said, currently do have an override. If the board decided they wanted to, they could go to the voters for a new authorization that would take effect July 1st, 2024, and then would begin the phase-down phase in July of 29. The election would be November 7th of 2023. This is actually a year early, which is not unheard of. There are many districts that will go a year early on an override if it isn't passed, they don't automatically hit that phase-out period. They have another year to try at it. In addition, the November 24 election also happens to be a presidential election. So there are many districts that are going for those overrides a little bit earlier because presidential elections tend to be a little bit more difficult to pass overrides. Like I said, we do have the current override. It would phase out in November of, if it wasn't passed in November of 23 or wasn't taken to voters in 23, it would go hopefully in November of 24. If that was not successful, then the phase out would begin in fiscal year 25-26. And that's about a $7.3 million phase out that we would have to reduce our budget, our M&O budget, by approximately $7.3 million that year. A little bit of the background on the M&O override. The estimated tax, and this is a little hard to do for the future because our property assessed valuation changes. It generally goes up as the valuation goes up. That helps bring our tax rate down a little bit. So when I looked at what would that really look like for the future, I based it on what we know now for our property tax for next year, and kind of looked at projecting where would that M&O be in 2 years from now, and what could that property tax be. So this is a very rough estimate of what it is, but essentially it's pretty much where we are right now. If you round that up, it's 32 cents per $100 of property taxable value. It's basically the same if the override were to pass. Again, the override is approximately $21.5 million. It's 15% of the revenue control limit. So that fluctuates depending on what our ADM is, as well as what the state determines as a base level for our funding. But looking at where we are now, where we think that will project out in the future, it's approximately $21.5 million. We have some time. We're bringing this forward early for the governing board to just think about and kind of ask questions on. If the governing board would like to move forward with a call for election, we would need to let Maricopa County Elections know no later than June 10th. The election would be all mail-in, so like our last override that was for capital items, it would be a full mail-in ballot. And the district does pay for the elections. For our last election, it was $127,000 roughly, so we figure it would be about the same amount for this election. This next slide just looks at our property taxes. We do have a higher tax valuation. That makes it so that we are able to do things with secondary taxes, overrides, bonds, and still keep our tax rate very low. This is actually based off of the fiscal year 22-23 tax rate right now. Primary taxes being your basic revenue from the state, secondary taxes being your overrides and bonds. So when we look at our other districts, we're actually quite a bit lower. Dysart is actually the closest in size to Scottsdale, and you can see right now tax rates are quite a bit lower than that one. And then this just provides a current purposes. If the board decided that they would like to go out for another override, these can be changed. They can be different. They can be exactly the same. These are just the current purposes, and we've used these purposes actually for the last 2 overrides that we've been in. So the last one being November of, I believe it was November of 16. So November of 19 is the one that we're currently in, but the override before that had the exact same purposes, so we have not changed these in a while. But those purposes being to maintain class size ratios, maintain all-day kindergarten. I'm not sure if the community is aware, but the state only funds kindergarten at half. We offer a full-day kindergarten, so it would be maintaining the full-day kindergarten for our students. Music, arts, world languages, athletics, and co-curricular activities, so those after-school programs, world languages in our classes. Technology, and when I talk about technology, this is more, we have staff that go in the classroom in our teaching technology type classes. So this isn't buying technology or staffing the technology department. This is actually looking at teachers who are in the classroom teaching about technology to our students. When they did this 2 back, they added 3 additional days for certified teachers for professional development. So the staff professional development includes 3 additional days for our teaching staff and horizontal movement, as well as providing competitive compensation for our staff. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Board Member Carney.
Thank you, President Snowski. Thank you, Shannon, for this. I just have a question on the cost. So the $127,000, would it be the same if we would do it this November or next November be the same cost?
Yes, Board Member Carney, yes. This is based off of what our election was the last time. It could fluctuate. We have to pay for basically postage and for the pamphlets, printing, getting it translated, and then it depends on how many voters you have, registered voters in your community. And so it could fluctuate a little bit, but I don't think it's one of those that it's going to be more. I guess if postage went up, it could be more in the future, but it stays relatively the same. So it would be it could be a little bit more, it could be a little, it just kind of depends on really what postage is running at and voters in the community.
Okay,
Can I
so
just clarify? So we pay a portion of the election in the general election as well as off-year elections?
Yes.
Yeah, that's my question. So a special election doesn't cost more, a special election ballot doesn't cost more than if we're going on a general election ballot? That's,
No.
okay. And that price also does include the printing of the pamphlets that need to be mailed to voters? That's all encompassing? Okay, thank you. And then last question is, then could we use money from this override to pay for school resource officers then?
Board Member Carney, that's a great question. There's not a simple answer. The answer is technically yes. However, because it's a continuation of what we're already doing, it's not going to provide additional funds for us. It's going to maintain us at the level we're at now. So whereas SROs could be purchased with M&O dollars, then something else would have to come out. So it's not going to give us additional on top of what we're already funded at, which we're using those funds. So technically, yes, we could. It's just something else that we're paying for would have to be removed.
Okay, and the same would be true for the security positions?
Yes, ma'am.
So if the community is wanting that and they're asking for that, this is something that could be used for that. Thank you.
Any other comments from board members? Board Superintendent, Dr.
I
Menzel?
just wanted to add, for that purpose, though, we would need to modify the acceptable uses if we're going to do security as part of it. So to the earlier point, you can modify the list of approved expenditures before it goes to the ballot.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Shannon, can you please clarify for the public what horizontal movement means?
Yes, Board President Snowski. Horizontal movement is for certified employees. And so as they take their college level classes or work towards a master's or achieve a master's, or they're working towards a doctorate degree, as they earn certain numbers of credits, they move on our salary schedule depending on those credits.
Thank you for doing that. And very comprehensive report. I appreciate it.
Yes. Board Member Hartwells, yeah, when you look at the tax rate, so it's not based off of looking at your house and saying, my house is, if I sold it today, would be sold for $1 million, and so therefore I'm being taxed on $1 million of because that's what my property could sell for. They look at the taxable value, so it's a different number, and it changes depending on where your house is in your house, but it's a lower number, so it's not that what your house is valued at if you were to sell it right now. It's the value of it of what you're being taxed on.
Thank you.
Yes.
When we went out for the DA override, that was just a point that continued to need to be reinforced because it's not necessarily intuitive. People think about the value of their home, right, as opposed to the property taxable value of their home. So thank you for adding that.
Seeing that there are no other questions or comments, thank you, Shannon.
Yes.
But don't leave because you're coming up here. We are going to move on to our action items. Board action is required on the following items, and we have several of those this evening. 5A is the acceptance of audits and compliance questionnaire for fiscal year 2021-22. Shannon.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Board President Snowski, Vice President Warner, members of the board, Dr. Menzel and guest. This is a look at our audit from last fiscal year, so completed a year ago. And so we have with us Sandy Kromstrom, who is with Clifton Larson and Allen, the firm that we currently use for our audits. And so she will be doing a presentation on the various audits and financial reports that they did. The one thing I would say is afterwards, we are required to do a roll call for that. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam President, Vice President, members of the board. As Shannon said, I'm Sandy Kronstrom. I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen, and I'm here to present the results of the June 30, 22 audit. So you should have in your packets tonight a number of reports from us, and I'm sure you've read them cover to cover and have lots of questions for me. But so the first one I want to talk about is there's a governance communication, which is kind of an overview of the audit, some of the estimates that we use when preparing the financial statements, those types of things. We'll get into it in a little more detail. But there's one of those documents for the regular school district audit. There's also another one for the school insurance trust report as well. You should have the annual comprehensive financial report. That's the school district financial statements, the Scottsdale Trust audit report, the single audit reports, and the Uniform System of Financial Records, or the USFR, as we call it, the compliance questionnaire as well. So when we do the district's audit, we typically come out during the year of audit. So for 2022, we were on site back in May of 2022 doing some of our, what we call our preliminary work, where we are actually looking at transactions in the year that they're occurring, walking them through your processes and procedures to gain an understanding of how your processes are working. We did that back in May, another one on site in June, and then when we come after year end, after your annual financial report is completed and filed with the state, we come back to do what we call our final phase of the audit, where we're actually doing the financial statement piece and preparing the financial statements themselves. Your audit is budgeted for about 500 staff hours. We put a little more time into it this year due to a rather large lease implementation that we'll talk about a little bit later. So kind of at a glance, as I mentioned, the governance communication, there are certain estimates that the district uses to prepare their financial statements. Those are listed in that governance communication. Some of those are kind of the estimated lives of your capital assets, the unfunded pension and OPEB liabilities are estimates, compensated absences, the claims liability for the trust as well as an estimate. We also talk about if we had any difficulties during the audit process, which we did not. And we also had what we call 2 uncorrected misstatements. They're small dollar amounts, they're insignificant to the district's financial statements, so the district's management decided not to post them and include them in the financial statements. Those are related to an old capital lease. I believe that's just not significant, and a premium payment through the trust. We do track those from year to year to make sure that if you were to pick up another capital lease along the way, we would then probably start to record those in the district's financial statements. We also had 2 material audit adjustments. That means as we were doing our audit work, we found a couple of items that needed to be adjusted after we were given the financial information from the district. That related to some revenue accruals and some classroom site fund payroll expenditures. The annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR as we call it, that includes our audit report, our opinion on your financial statements. We have issued an unmodified, or what is commonly termed as a clean opinion. If you had a chance to look at that at all in the report, you'll notice we had some auditing standard changes on our side this year. So the format of that report has changed. So it used to be the actual opinion on the financial statements was maybe 4 or 5 paragraphs down in the report. It is now front and center. It's the first 2 paragraphs, if you want to take a look at that report. Also included within the ACFR is you guys submit your report for the Certificate of Excellence in Reporting to both GFOA and ASBO. So you'll see the prior year certificates for you earning those certificates. And those, and the 2022 ACFR was also submitted to both of those entities for consideration for the award again for this year. There were no new bonds issued, and one of the significant things in your report is there was actually about a $50.7 million decrease in your pension liability. That's related to your Arizona State retirement system, and that's based on your, kind of the district's proportionate share of the overall liability for that system. The reports were dated February 24th, 2023, so we issued those back towards the end of February. The single audit reports, there's 2 reports within that document. One relates to your internal controls, government auditing standards. We did not have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses to report. The second report relates to internal controls and compliance over your federal programs. We issued, again, another clean opinion on that. We had no matters of non-compliance and no internal control deficiencies, and that was issued on the same day as the ACFR. The insurance trust, we had a clean opinion on the trust financial statements as well. We did have one material weakness reported that related to, there are a number of journal entries that we have to post to eliminate activity and kind of incorporate to prepare the financial statements from the trust documents that we receive. That report was issued a couple days before the ACFR. It was on February 22nd. Again, as I mentioned, the ACFR had the clean opinion. When we're actually planning and performing our audit work, we use a risk-based approach, whereas we're spending our time on the areas that we determine to be higher risk areas as far as the audit goes. So for this district, management override of controls, revenue recognition, cash and investments, and year-end cutoff, along with the completeness of the GASB 87 lease population, were considered to be risk areas for your 22 audit. So as I mentioned, the GASB 87 lease implementation, kind of a big deal in the government auditing world. What's happening is they're trying to make the statements more comparable across entities. And so we had to go ahead and look at some of the lease documents that in the past were never recorded as receivables to the district. So in your case, there were 30 potential lease agreements that we took a look at. We determined 9 of them did not meet the criteria for GASB 87, but 21 of them did. And as a result of that, what we do is we kind of look at the term of the lease, how many renewals there are, and there are some leases that you have that go out pretty far. They may not sound like large dollar amounts, but when you start accumulating them and looking at them, a lot of cell tower leases, those types of things were what we were looking at. So as a result of that, we recorded, or the district reported about $2.6 million of lease receivables, offset by a deferred inflow, which is similar to a liability, and those monies will get recognized over the life of those leases, but it's just so you know now you've got a number of kind of what's out there for the leases. Single audit, as I mentioned, we had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. The report on compliance, same thing, no findings. That's related to where we actually are testing your federal programs for compliance. The programs that we selected are, I believe, are on the next slide, but we actually selected and tested about 57% of your total federal dollars this past year and audited them. And we had a clean opinion, no findings related to that. This is a list of the programs that we actually did test this year. So Title I was tested, your special education cluster was tested, and then the ESSER dollars were tested. And that's what's making up that 57% of dollars that we looked at. The USFR compliance questionnaire, that's about a 40-page document with a lot of yes and no questions, very compliance-driven. Did the district file their annual financial report by October 15th and upload it to ADE by that time? You know, it's very, very specific. We had 2 minor findings, and I was on a call today with the Auditor General's office, and I think she said there's 177 questions on that questionnaire right now. So, not bad. Property, we had one related to property control. We look at assets, we look at your capital asset list, and we pull items, and we go out to school sites, and we look to see if that asset's really where you say it is. And when we're out there, we look at items and bring them back to the list and make sure that they're on the list. So we had one instance that the location wasn't jiving. And then student transportation, we had an overstatement of the reported miles on that one. So for the insurance trust, again, another clean opinion. The ending net position for the trust is at about $43.6 million. That's a decrease of $4.2 million over the prior year. There's $47.1 million of cash and investments, and there was an increase in the estimated claims of about $1.6 million. And as I mentioned, we had the one material weakness, and that was kind of converting that information into usable form to actually prepare the financial statements. I know that was a lot of information, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Governing board members, do you have any questions for Ms. Cromston? Dr. Hartwells.
Thank you, Board President Sinowski. Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to, if we could, on the comprehensive financial report, you said there were 2. Actually, no, you had the risk-based approach. That was the comprehensive financial report, right?
Correct.
One of those that you'd listed that an area that was focused on was management's override of controls. Can you tell us a little bit more about and what the findings were? Does that relate to the finding that of the property controls where the location was off? Or
No,
is this different?
so management override of controls is a risk that every one of our audits has, and that is the risk that there could be that a person in management could actually override a control that's in place, maybe approve a journal entry, that they prepared, or, something of that nature. But it doesn't have anything to do with the property control issue.
And what were
It's kind of an overall risk that, like I said, all of our audits have. It's just kind of inherent in the process that when there's human beings doing things, that there's always that risk that somebody could not follow a control that's in place.
Okay, and what were the findings?
We had no
Nothing?
findings.
Very good.
Yeah.
So exactly what I was hoping to hear. Okay, and then you listed there were 2 material audit adjustments, something relating to revenue. I did not catch it in my notes quickly enough. And then the other one was a classroom site fund payroll expenditure. Can you talk to us a little bit more specificity on both of those matters, please?
So I believe there were some grant revenues that had crossed fiscal years that we needed to accrue as a part of it, record as a receivable and revenue back into the prior fiscal year. And then the same with the classroom site. I believe one of the payouts for some of your classroom site monies were crossed fiscal years, but they were related to fiscal year '22.
So there was some bridging
Yes.
accounting. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Hartwells. So we had some revenues in the crossover year that a journal entry got done, reverse of what should have happened. That was actually an issue in the 2021 audit. So we had to correct it for this fiscal, the 21-22 audit. So that was one of it, is correcting from 2 years ago. And then the other one, our classroom site funds, during COVID, we had paid the whole amount in June and recorded it as June, because the revenue comes in June, or I'm sorry, the revenue comes in throughout the whole school year. we had paid it out fully in June during the COVID years. Before COVID, and what we went back to this year is part of the 301 recommendation or approved performance pay portion has to do with test scores. And we don't get that information. In fact, I don't think we got it this year until late October timeframe. And so we weren't able to pay the second portion, essentially, of the 301 monies until later on in the school year. And so because of that, it crosses fiscal years, and that became the journal entry that they had to do to record basically a payable that's going to
So it
happen
balanced
in
out.
a different fiscal year.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all explainable to me and understandable. And then can we go to the, there were two, well, first, well done on the single audit report. I think managing the federal money in compliance, 100% compliance, pretty impressive. But you listed, there were two, this property controls, this location, was it incorrectly journaled or incorrectly written down? What could you, in iVision,
So I
there was a disconnect.
believe
in
what
iVision.
happened is we looked at your property control list and it said, you know, this particular asset should be in this room at Saguaro High School or wherever it was. And we went to look there and it was actually in a different place.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
what that's related to.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they
It-
pranked
It
you.
was
No.
found, but it just wasn't where it was said,
Okay.
where we thought it
easily
was going to
fixable.
be.
Right. The property was identified somewhere else and it was fixed, right?
I
It wasn't
believe so.
missing?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then on the, so that was the USFR, actually, just for the community there. The trust, it was clean, otherwise there was a one material weakness, and you said that had to do with, what was that? Could you remind me what the material weakness was?
So my understanding is that there's quite a bit of eliminations and like summarizing of information from the actual trust to get it into the format to actually prepare the financial statements. And that's something that we did as auditors, and typically that would be something that the district would do prior to giving it to us, so that we would just basically be auditing that information. So
So there's a very clunky export of data mechanism? Is that basically what this is? Yes? No?
Dr. Hartwell, yes. So our insurance is paid, the self-insurance trust pays for our insurance for medical, pharmacy, dental, ancillary things, is paid to Kairos as our administrator. And so we record in our general ledger system our payment to Kairos each month as a payment out. What we don't record is all of the information on how and who Kairos, or summarize that as to how much Kairos is putting. We have that information in a ledger that Kairos provides us, but for our staff to be able, I just don't have the manpower in our department for somebody to key all that in. What we did talk about after this is that there are possibly some reports or things that could assist so that we could do it more quickly and then hand it to our auditors to be able to fill out that report. But it was at this point, there was no way for us to manually enter in all that information. And we perceived it as we're recording what we paid to a vendor in our general ledger. We just weren't recording what the vendor was then paying.
But we have access to this information, we're just not reconciling it up so that it's easily auditable?
I wouldn't say that it's not that we're not reconciling it up, it's just not getting it into the format that our auditor needs to be able to easily compile their financial information.
Well, I would suggest that we address this. I recall this was an issue last year in the audit. And if that is a risk. I see it as a possible risk that you can lose material information along the way. If you have 5 steps to do something when you should have maybe 1 or 2, then maybe this is something that the trust board, Mr. Lindsay, can take back and they can talk about. This seems like something that could be addressed in our technological age that we live in.
Yes, Board Member Hartwell's, that is something that we have addressed with one of the auditors from the team as, okay, how can we get this information the way that you need it so that you can prepare those financials? So we will be working towards that.
Okay, very good, thank you. Just for the community, Board Member Lindsay sits on the trust board. That's why I referenced him. Thank you very much, Sandy.
Any other questions or comments? Yep. At this time, I'd like to take a roll call vote to accept the audit and compliance questionnaire for fiscal year 2021. I will call each board member's name, and you can respond with a yes or a no. Board Member Carney?
Yes.
Board Member Lindsay?
Yes.
Board Member Dr. Hartwells?
Yes.
Vice President Werner?
Yes.
And Julie Sanowski is a yes vote as well. At this time, that does pass 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, and we will go on to 5B, which is approve all high school assistant principals move to the 12-month work calendars and contracts. Ms. Wilson?
Good evening, President Sanowski, governing board members, and Dr. Menzel. We are recommending that the governing board approve the change for our high school assistant principals to move, for all of them to be 12-month employees for the 23-24 school year. You have before you some information, but I would like to point out that the interspace negotiation team for the Scottsdale Administrators Association came together because there's an interest in retaining and recruiting administrators to the position, and we've had some turnover with some of our 11-month APs, and this was an option that was proposed. The amount is approximately $67,000, and we had tabled it previously in our IBN group, but came back to the table to answer some further questions about it, and then came to consensus, I think, last week or so, and so we're pleased to bring this recommendation to you this evening.
Governing board members, do you have any questions for Ms. Wilson? I just want to make comments since there are no requests for comments. I appreciated the conversation and the questions that were fielded ahead of time by governing board members about work assignments and making sure that by extending their contract an additional month, that there is going to be fair work expected out of that additional month of compensation.
Yes, President Sanowski, and I may have to punt to my colleague, Dr. Sackos, but the idea is to share the wealth of work between the ending of one school year and in preparation for the next school year, and to also be able to have some crossover so that if someone needed to take some time off, there was coverage there at the site as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into obviously preparing
Sure.
schedules, looking at students' 504 and IEPs, registrations, and things of that sort. So that is the intent.
Yep, and I appreciated those details that were shared with us all in advance. Seeing that there are no requests from anyone to add additional comment at this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve all the high school assistant principals move to 12-month work calendars and contracts. All in favor? Oh, is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Hartwells, thank you, Dr. Hartwells. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Moving on to approval of facility use agreement rental policy manual. Shannon Crozier and Dennis Rayler, I believe, are here to support that.
Well, those were all wonderful presentations. Now we get into the meat of the business here. President Sanowski, Vice President Warner, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, before you, we've got our new facility rental policy manual. It has not been revised since 2016. and it is high time to do so. We have since then switched from I don't know what you call a 5-layer contract, you press really hard to sign it kind of document, to a digital software. It is a module of School Dude, our FS Direct is what people know it as, and everything is now done digitally. There's no paperwork that flows around the schools. Everything is managed through one of the gals, Lisa Marcarelli, in my office, and so we've done a tremendous amount of work talking with community members, organizations, leadership within the district, Nathan Slater, our AD, principals, trying to get as much input as we can. Facility use is probably my biggest nightmare. I'll do construction in the rain with lightning bolts shooting at me before I like to work on this facility use manual. We have tried very, very hard to make this as fair as we could possibly be. We have to trust that everybody's doing the right thing. These are district facilities that cost a lot of money to take care of. And so we have before you, the proposal is a very fair, what I think is a very, very fair cost to rent our buildings, to use our facilities. But it means that everyone that uses our facilities must pay those fees. We can't have people going to the superintendent and asking for a freebie. We can't ask people to pay on one side and not pay on the other side. So we try very hard, and Lisa does a really good job in my office to make sure that these rules are applied diligently to everyone. Sometimes people try and skirt around an issue, and don't do that because Lisa will catch you. So this particular presentation was presented a few months back when there was a lot of conversation about high school lacrosse. I thought when I looked at the presentations, it was still very valid. There's not a whole lot that we've changed. We've refined. We've worked with Ms. McLennan to clean up some language. The formatting was a disaster when we went through it for the 50th time, and we just couldn't seem to get it. So Lisa was actually kind enough to deal with my OCD and retype the whole document from scratch to make sure that it was exactly how we needed it to be. So the fees themselves are supposed to be updated annually. And that obviously hasn't been done. There were 2 years in COVID that we weren't even really renting facilities. We were pushing everybody away. We opened that back up, and so we thought, now's the time. We've gone digital. We need to revisit these, and moving forward, we will make sure that we bring these back on a regular basis. So I've got about 10 slides of policy and statute. I'm going to skip right through them. They're there. We'll have it posted on the website if people want to go look at it. But I've highlighted just a few things, and that it says that we are to assess a reasonable fee for our facilities. A couple of things that we really must do is pay for the people that help service or help provide a service, the custodians, the security guards, anybody, the grounds guys that are working baseball tournaments and things like that. So we definitely need to make sure we're covering those costs. And then beyond that, the use of our facilities, the fees themselves, I don't want to say they're entirely arbitrary, but there's no mandate to say that we have to charge a fee for the rental of the facility. So we look at what salaries are attached to the Civic Center Fund. We look at our longevity in our gyms, of the gym floors. How often do we resurface the gym floors? How often are we having to repair basketball hoops or something in the football stadium because of the use and abuse that they get from so many users on our facilities? So in policy and in statute, they both say that we must recover some of those costs, those actual costs. It identifies that our properties are available, our grounds are available, buses may be available. With our current situation with bus drivers and the lack thereof, that becomes a little bit more difficult because they're spending all of their time doing field trips and after-hours athletic events on top of their regular bus routes. So all monies that come from facility rentals, they go into the Civic Center Fund, and that's the only place they go. And then they use that money for salaries, and I always like to hit up Shannon for repairs. If we get a damaged basketball hoop during a big tournament, I want to make sure that that tournament pays for that repair instead of the school or building services. Again, with the reasonable use fees. So we have, as you'll see in a few slides, we have really worked hard to make sure that our fees are reasonable. I would challenge anyone to go to a City of Scottsdale venue or anywhere else and try and get the venues for the cost that we have placed on them. One of the things that we did when we were talking about lacrosse a few months ago, which we hadn't done before, was create this classification determination matrix. And it was curious after Lisa and I sat down and we talked about all of the different things that make up a classification. And so we just, in this particular example, we just put a few of the folks that are within our organization that use our facilities, and we placed them in all the different areas. And that's ultimately how we got to the point that we endorsed and recommended that the high school lacrosse teams that are representing their schools but not endorsed by or sanctioned by the AIA, that's how we landed that they really should be a Class 1 and as much a part of the school as we can make them short of that AIA sanctioning. So this is new to us. Member Carney, you had asked for something. We don't have this as a complete document, but Lisa is working on putting that together, so you'll have that information. And we will use this as new organizations come on board and they make requests. We will show them this document and show them how we got to our decision that you're a Class 2 or a Class 3 or a Class 4. Right now, just recently, we had NAU at Saguaro High School as a university. So they're a Class 3. They pay a little bit higher fee, but I think the university can afford it. This week, we've got New York Jets players, 21 of them, practicing. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Don't everybody go there. We've got them practicing at Saguaro High School during the day. So I think those players can definitely afford. So they're actually a Class 4. They're a profit-making organization, so they pay the highest fees for the use of our facility. So classifications defined. This is something that we really wrestled with, how to make it so that it was bulletproof, if you will, that people couldn't question, well, why is Class 1 this or Class 2 that? And we scoured the state and looked at all of the other districts and what they were putting in their documents, how they were classifying people. And there are districts that do it differently. Some of them have 3 classes and that's it. Some of them have 5 classes and spread that out a little bit more. We landed on 4. We thought that was appropriate. And so these are the classifications that we've landed on. We believe that, again, it's fair for our PTOs and APTs and the organizations that are most closely working with our students and benefiting our schools. While U.S. Youth Soccer or Phoenix Rising or any of the other youth sports organizations are also working with our kids, they're also working with kids from other places. And they do set their fees, their registration fees, how much they charge for participating in a tournament, how much they charge for their recreational program, how much they charge for their club program. So they have a little bit more flexibility in how they operate and where those dollars go. They don't all come to us. There are typically paid coaches and paid administrators for these organizations, although some of the organizations are very much volunteer-based and they do a lot to try and minimize that. One of the things, I'm sorry, my allergies are going nuts with all this wind. One of the things that I considered as we were looking through the classifications and looking at the fees is that hopefully people look at those fees and will reflect on that and pass that savings along to the users. So if they're putting on a tournament and they do the calculation and they realize that, oh, well, this 2-day tournament's only going to cost us $1,200, maybe we don't need to charge $450, we can charge $400. Maybe that's the optimist in me, but that was kind of my thought process. So one of the things that played into all of this was the cost of utilities. Now, in the grand scheme of things, we pay a lot for our utilities. $5.7 million goes out every year, and it goes up every year, towards water, gas, sewer, and electricity. And so when we look at that, and before it was a very complex fee structure with very high costs associated with utilities, and then an equally high cost associated with the rental of the facility. And so I'm sure that someone smarter than me can come up with a better calculation for this, but I break it down in the most simple terms. You've got $5.7 million that you're putting out. You have 4 million square feet of property. That doesn't include the acreage, so that number would go down even further. Cost of utilities per year, it's just a simple add, subtract, division at $1.38 per year. So if we're trying to figure out cost per square foot per hour, we keep that calculation going, and you see that that number is crazy, 0.000157 for the cost per square foot per hour. Well, then you get into a 7,000 square foot gym, it's $1.10 an hour. Okay, go back to that arbitrary cost of renting the facility. That's really accounting for some maintenance and the staffing. Let's just throw them together. Let's put them together. There's no hard calculation. People aren't racking their brains, okay, how much is this gonna cost? And you'll see in my few examples here shortly that all of a sudden it becomes a much more affordable opportunity here in Scottsdale schools. So the new proposed fees, as you go through this, you see Class 1, which again are those people that are most closely bound to our schools and our students, PTOs, APTs, the clubs. There was a time, and I think I've got an example in here, of clubs paying $300-400 for an event, and we've got that down to like $92 for an event. So the kids that are operating something they got to pay for the person that's going to clean up the trash and clean the bathrooms, and they got to pay for some incidentals, but generally speaking, they're not paying a bunch of money to the buildings that, ultimately it's our responsibility for. So Class 1 is no charge, and this is elementary and middle schools. And then you get into the Class 2, and you see that these numbers, generally speaking, are very reasonable. Elementary schools, middle schools probably more so with our IGA, our intergovernmental agreement with the city of Scottsdale, but generally speaking, the facilities are not rented out a ton at the elementary and middle school level. So we have those numbers in there, but they are very, very reasonable. I will note, I'm sorry, on the left-hand side here, obviously when we have people on staff working during an event because they're already working, they might be cleaners, they might be, the FSWs, the facility service workers, we're not going to charge people for that service. When they have to come in on a Saturday or a Sunday or a holiday or during a break, when we are at summer break, that's when a lot of our people take the opportunity to go on vacation. That's when they're doing the deep cleaning, the deep maintenance work. And so for people to have events during that time, that's when we have to charge for it, because we're pulling them away from other work that they're responsible for. High schools, it gets a little bit more expensive, but I think if you were to look at some of our surrounding school districts, our main gym, our auxiliary gym, these competitive facilities are fairly reasonable. I saw one school district that their athletic stadium field was $200 an hour, starting at the Class 2 level. And I kind of got the stink eye from Greg Skelton, our lead grounds, because he knows what it takes to maintain these fields. And that's why we do attach some fees to the stadium, some extra fees to make sure that service is able to be done. So looking at what was and what is, or what I'm proposing, and in specific reference to the student council doing a fundraiser in the main gym, this particular example, they were paying $300 or nearly $300 for the use of that facility. And through the changes that we've proposed, that's now a $92.75 cost to them. So as they're bringing in ticket sales, selling popcorn, doing whatever they're doing, we're not taking a bunch of money away from them. Then moving on to the high school club basketball youth program, you can see there that there's originally, or with our current structure, almost $2,600, and we're looking to move that down to $1,237. So even those youth programs that can set their pricing, we're trying to be as kind as we can to that. One of the challenges that we've seen and heard quite a bit is, why do I need security? And since Josh has been on, it's kind of been a big deal that we put security on the campuses when there are these big events. And so we will, at minimum, within the agreement, if there's going to be 150 people at the event, then there's got to be a security guard. Beyond that, if there's 500 or 1,000 or whatever the case may be, that's a conversation that we will have with the renter before they sign their contract, to let them know that this is what we're thinking. This is what we feel is appropriate for your venue, for your activity, and make sure that we're all in agreement. It won't be a surprise. It won't be something that's completely arbitrary. Those will be conversations that the renter and our Director of Safety and Security will have before that activity begins. Okay? We'll kind of skip scenario 3 because that was really built specifically for lacrosse when there was conversations about lacrosse. Now, one thing I met with lacrosse after that meeting, and the one thing that we made crystal clear amongst us all is that the Class 1 classification is for their high school teams. They have other teams, other developmental teams at a younger level, and they will be Class 2, like everybody else that's running a developmental soccer program or baseball or whatever the case may be. But they're high school teams that are associated with our high schools that are predominantly our high school kids. They'll be Class 1 and treated as much as we can like our high school teams. I believe I mentioned it before that our fields are consumed by people all the time. And so we've already seen a little bit of back and forth trying to get field time for the lacrosse teams, but we're working with Nathan Slater and the ADs and trying to work that out so that everybody gets some good access to the facilities. Most of our practice fields are not lighted, and so the stadium field is really the field that everybody needs to practice on. And then finally, Class 4, dance companies that come in, they're usually late spring, early summer. I remember when my niece was going, and it was always like 400 degrees when we got to Canyon View High School to see it in the summer. They're pretty much paying the same fees. They are for-profit organizations. They are charging a fee at the entrance to the auditorium that is to help pay for that rental. So we don't feel that's an extraordinary cost to them, but I'm sure someone would tell me I'm full of it. So that's my presentation. I know that you all got the clean, nice version, and then much, much later, I'm sorry, you got the red and nasty version. I'll certainly take any questions. If there's anything that I can't answer, I will get back to you ASAP tomorrow. I don't know this by heart, but I've looked at it enough that I could probably struggle through any questions you might have.
Do any of the governing board members have questions for Mr. Rayler at this time? Dr. Hartwells.
Thank you, Dennis, for your presentation. Thank you, Board President Snowski. No surprise, I have questions. I actually didn't get a chance to look at the red line, but my questions are more general than that, actually. The facility, so my understanding is actually some of these fees have not changed, or they've actually gone up in the Class 2. Is that correct? A couple of years ago, the fees were a little lower than what was proposed today to go in effect July 1 of 2023, right?
For Class 2, I don't believe that's the case. And I'll say this because almost all of our users, the sports folks and all of that, were actually Class 3s before.
Okay.
So when you look at this example, scenario number 2, they were Class 2 or 3s, and we've reduced them to Class 2s. So I will absolutely verify that for you, but I do not believe that's the case, because don't forget, we had the fee plus we had the utility. So they might have paid a $45 fee for the rental per hour, and then a $35 an hour utility fee. So there is, I'm going to stake a claim on this, that they are not, none of the fees have gone up in any way
In the last year?
in the last year.
Okay. Well, I would like to talk to you about a use case that I
Sure.
think might, I don't know if it's an outlier or not, but that isn't consistent. But nonetheless, in terms of what's proposed tonight going forward, I agree that the fee rates are, especially for our facilities, which are beautiful and need to be maintained at beautiful, are very reasonable. So thank you for all of that work. I know you've been working on this for a while, so thank you and Lisa. The discretion of the security and the custodian, and I just want to make sure that that's a universally applied, whatever rubric you're using. And let me give you a use case here that I think is more nuanced than how this is being presented. If you have an event, let's say an organization that falls in the class 2 on Saturday, and they have a game, and you have about, let's say, 50 fans or parents, and then all those parents leave because there's a new game, and then another 50 come in. At no point, and let's say you have, 4 of those games, you've now met the 200 in the aggregate for security, but at no point did you ever have 200 people present. So how would that be dealt with going forward?
One of the questions that that Dr. Menzel and I talked about the other day, and we'll seek counsel from Ms. McLennan, is that where do we draw the line as to providing security and not providing security? What are the scenarios in which security really is not necessary? And I'll give you this example. If we have 3 different activities on a Friday night, and it's not a football night, but 3 other activities, maybe something in the auditorium that is our fine arts folks putting on a show. Then we have a football program that is not ours out there on the football field. And then we've got something going on in the Innovation Center for Robotics. Do we provide security because we're protecting our students within our school programs? Or do we just let it go? To the reverse of that, or to the other argument of that, what if it's just a youth football program out on the football field on a Saturday, like you've said, and nobody else is in the football stadium? Is it our responsibility to provide that security and provide that sense of security? Or is it the organization's responsibility to provide that security for their folks that are there? So it's something that has come up. We've been talking to a few of the organizations that are concerned about the security. And so I'd like to get further conversation happening about that to make sure that we aren't going overboard in providing that security for someone. So I liken it to a retail store that has security cameras out in their parking lot, but they don't work. They're just there for show. And someone gets mugged, there's a reasonable expectation that they have safety or someone's watching those cameras. Well, that retail store needs to take responsibility for that. If someone's coming to our school and using our facility, but it doesn't have anything to do with the function of our school, do we really need to provide security for that? And that's their argument, is that why am I paying security now when for the last 10 years, I never had to pay for security? So that's one piece that we need to explore further and better understand what our liability is for providing or not providing security during these events.
Okay, and in that, let me just pull that thread a little bit more. Those organizations typically have insurance, right? So why can't they waive some of these costs? So this is, in my mind, and I'm going to get to the custodian in that same use example I just gave you.
Yep.
because, it's the fee approach, where colleges are notorious for this, the fee to death, okay? The base price is fine and attractive, and then, by the way, we're going to require, that's it. We gave you the steering wheel, now you got a fee
Buy
for
all
the
the parts.
wheels, a fee for the catalytic converter.
Yes.
And if you're imposing these kinds of additional fees, which I get the facility thing, this is not that. I get that. You can double the cost easily, right? And the lens I'm looking at this through is a lot of times these are community organizations. These are the same community members that we go out to and ask for overrides. So I want to put that reasonableness context around it and just be careful that we don't go down this dogmatic route of, well, there were at some point between 9 and 5 today, 200 people here, and therefore 2 custodians and a security officer had to be here, even though, by the way, you organization are required legally by your insurance to have your own medical professional there and your own security, and we don't care. I just don't want us to head down that road, and I don't want it to be even perceived that we're going to go down that road. Because I don't think that was the good faith effort that you're making here in redoing this facility agreement, even though I'm guessing you pinched your nose the whole time you did it. So, but we could end up there, right?
Yes.
That's where I'm coming from on this,
So
okay?
I absolutely understand your case that you're speaking of. I think sometimes what we find on the other side of it is that what's actually happening out there is a little bit different than what's being reported. And I'll give you an example without naming someone. There are certain organizations that they do a great job of putting on a great show. They do a horrible job of policing their attendees. And there's stuff all over the bleachers. There's garbage all the way out to the parking lot. There's nobody policing that, no volunteer managing that effort. And so we get a report on Monday morning that, hey, so-and-so was here and the place is a mess. And now I need to not do my school responsibilities on Monday morning and go clean up the student parking lot or do whatever the case may be. So I absolutely get what you're saying. We will look at that very closely, and we will make sure that both parties, the organization and the folks in building services and security, are doing the right thing for that organization. I've been in conversation with the group that you're referring to on more than one occasion, and I'm continuing to work with them to make sure that we're both on the same page. I think you all know by now, and if you don't, catch up. I'm the fairest guy in the district. I work with everybody. I try and make things work. I'm not about just imposing things on people. That's why I ask the tough questions. That's why I talk straight. And one way or another, we will figure it out for each and every organization that steps foot on our properties.
Well, I believe that, Dennis, and I think that, again, all the work, the background work that's gone into this, it shows, and I do think that it's fair, but I'm really looking at the implementation and kind of that rubric and the attitude of going forward with partnership. At least a lot of these folks are our community members, and so a partnership approach, which is aligned with our strategic goals, by the way.
Totally
So,
understand.
Okay, great, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Rayler? I have a comment for you, Dennis. We talk about these fees, hopefully putting in these consistent practices throughout SUSD so that we do have that Scottsdale standard of excellence for our facilities, right? And I really appreciate that. So that is consistent across our district. Has there been any discussion, and maybe if there hasn't been, maybe there should be, of some of those funds coming back to the specific site to support whatever needs that site that gets used heavily has to continue to provide that excellent facility. So let's take, for example, summer camps, sports, athletics type things. So heavier use, possibly directing some of that money or more of that money back to a site so they can specifically, you gave the Monday morning example. That's part of this too. Shannon, thanks. Yeah.
Board President Snowski, so when the rental money comes in, the way that we process it is the revenue all comes in. At the end of the school year, we look at what are the expenses for all of our rental facility, how much have we had to pay for security, for custodial, all of those activities. And then once that's done, we look at dividing that out. So what we've done is taken revenue in, expenses out, what's the balance after that? And then allocated that out based on how many students are at each school. So each school is getting a portion of the revenue. When it comes to the athletic camps, those run separately because they are run through our community education program. So those funds don't actually go into Civic Center, and we can't move them to Civic Center. By definition, because they are a community education program, they have to go into a fund that's separate, that's designated specifically for community schools. We do take a portion of those funds and put them in essentially an account that's held within the finance department. And we have used those funds to pay for a while, we just actually moved them out, but for a while we were paying for facility workers out of those funds from community education. And we have a number of facility workers that we also pay for out of that Civic Center fund. So we're making sure that all of the schools are receiving an allocation every single year for those rental funds. We also know that we have a balance in there from prior years. And so those monies are sitting aside in an unallocated account, and we use them. So if Dennis calls and says, hey, there's a problem at a school, this has gotten a lot of wear and tear, we can say, okay, here's some extra dollars that we have. We can put that aside for you to be able to fix that at that site. I think we recently did that with some Choya, which has been rented.
From the
So
rental.
long-term lease.
A better example is Saguaro High School. There was a property loss claim in both the auxiliary gym and the main gym, and the trust only pays for so much. So they were doing the repair 15 feet from the door, and they replaced all the wood. They'll refinish it, but then that wood that's brand new is going to be brand new, and everything else is going to be yellowed from years of. So we're taking those facilities monies and completely sanding and repainting that floor so it'll look brand new when we're done, to the tune of $58,000. So we really try really hard to support the schools and make sure that they have what they need when they need it. We were in Teen Town Hall at Saguaro, and I was getting peppered with questions. And one of the comments from one of the students, I think she was badminton, was saying that the auxiliary gym floor was in poor condition. 2 days later, I went and inspected it. While we had the gym floor guys there, we went ahead and had that repaired in 6 different locations. And so that floor, although we're not sanding it and completely repainted it, all the wood will be new, and the finish will be updated, and so that will be a nice upgraded result when we're all said and done. So we really try to turn that money around in the best way possible. Like I said, we find out that a hoop got broken, we get that hoop fixed with the rental money. So sometimes, if we give all the money away, then we have no money to do what we know needs to be done, and the schools will use it in different ways that might not be appropriate for keeping those facilities the way they need to be kept.
Well, Dennis, you gave a perfect example, because that was the example I was thinking about. So thank you. And it's not giving the money away in that situation. It's using it for what it's supposed to be used for. So
Absolutely.
kudos to everyone who's facilitating that type of expenditure. Seeing that there are no other comments on this particular item, I would like to make a motion to approve 5C, the approval of facility use agreement rental policy manual. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Board Member Carney seconds the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Up next is 5D, approve the use of Mojave Educational Services Cooperative Contract for the purchase and installation of playground at Sequoia Elementary School. I believe Shannon, any questions on this? Because everyone did receive this information in advance. No questions, Shannon. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the use of the Mojave Educational Services Cooperative Contract for the purchase and installation of the playground at Sequoia Elementary School. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Carney.
Second.
Oh, Dr. Hartwells, sorry, I'm kind of looking at the order. These little lights are coming up on my new screen here. Perfect. We have a second by Dr. Hartwells. All in favor to approve 5D, say aye. Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Moving on to 5E, approve the use of the State of Arizona Cooperative Contract for the purchase of radios and related equipment. Shannon is here to answer any questions if anyone has any at this time. Seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve the use of the State of Arizona Cooperative Contract for the purchase of radios and related equipment. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Hartwells. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion passes 5-0. On to 5F, approve the use of Mojave Educational Services Cooperative Contract for the purchase and installation of the playground at Pueblo Elementary School. Does anyone have any questions for Shannon at this time on this issue? None. Perfect. I'll make that motion to approve 5F, use of Mojave Educational Services Cooperative Contract for the purchase and installation of playground equipment at Pueblo Elementary School. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded again by Dr. Hartwells. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Moving along to 5G, approve the use of Mojave Educational Services Cooperative Contract for the purchase and installation of shade structure at Pueblo Elementary School. Any questions for Shannon on this particular action item? None. Okay. I'd like to make the motion to approve 5G, the use of the Mojave Educational Services Cooperative Contract for the purchase and installation of a shade structure at Pueblo Elementary School. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded again by Dr. Hartwells. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion passes 5-0. And on to 5H, approve the use of Scottsdale Unified School District contract to purchase the construction of a fire lane at Cochise Elementary School. Are there any questions for Shannon on this particular issue right now? Seeing none. Again, I would like to make the motion to approve 5H, the use of Scottsdale Unified School District contract to purchase the construction of fire lane at Cochise Elementary School. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Carney. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion passes 5-0. On to 5I, approve the award of invitation for bid IFB number 23012 for roof replacement at Chaparral High School, Saguaro High School, Tonalea Middle School, and Mojave Middle School. Wow, a lot of roofing going on there. Any questions for Shannon at this time on this particular item? I have a question. I think Dennis is standing ready to answer. So when are these expected to be completed if this gets approved here tonight?
So
It's a lot of roofs.
these are not technically ours to pay for. These are being submitted to the School Facilities Board for funding. And we learned last week that the School Facilities Board is out of money. And so I think grand total on those projects was about $18 million. And so we are still submitting them, and the School Facilities Board has to accept them, but they may sit on them for about a month until they then look at next year's budget, and then it would go for approval on next year's budget. So we are working towards a solution in which we could allocate some bond dollars to get the company started by buying materials and getting them going, but not fully fund the whole project. And then as soon as July 1 came along and the SFB has our stuff approved, then we would journal entry out of bond into 9/11, which is the fund for building renewal grants, and then move those projects forward. So I cannot give you a date for those. We are doing everything we can to influence the SFB to give us the money. One note for the record is those projects were all part of our bond program. And with the increase in expenses, I've not done a full high school roof replacement in probably 15 years. And back then, at Paradise Valley School District, a 400,000 square foot roof was about $1.3 million.
Wow.
So now, here, our budget in the bond was only a couple $1 million per roof. So we wouldn't have been able to pay for it regardless. And in these cases, these roofs are coming completely off, down to the deck, and then built back up. So they're going to be brand new, better pair of shoes like Michael Jordan's. We just can't afford them. So we're going to go to the SFB. We know that the SFB will ultimately approve them. So that's why we've come for approval for you. So then as soon as the SFB comes and approve them, you guys have already done the approval. We get the T&Cs in front of you, you sign off on them, and then we get the funding from the SFB. So we're just being super proactive, trying to make sure that when the money becomes available, all we need to do is push the PO.
So to be clear, all 4 of these facilities will have brand-new roofs.
Yes.
Perfect. Good. They need them. Any other questions, comments for Dennis? All right. Seeing that there are none, I would like to make a motion to approve the award of the invitation for bid number 23012 for roof replacement at Chaparral High School, Saguaro High School, Tonalea Middle School, and Mojave Middle School. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Hartwells. Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Dennis and Shannon. All right, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session pursuant to ARS Section 38-43103A9 for discussions with the district's Director of Safety and Security in order to discuss security plans, procedures, and systems relating to security or safety of facilities and operations maintained by the public body, as well as to move into executive session pursuant to same state statute, and 4, to obtain legal advice from the attorney for the public body and provide direction to the attorney regarding case number CV 2022-007839. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Hartwells. All in favor to move into executive session at this time, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 5-0. We will clear out the room at this time. 9:48 PM, I make a motion to exit our executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Hartwells. Thank you. All in favor to exit executive session at this time, say aye. Aye. And we will reconvene our special governing board meeting at 9:48 PM. I would like to make a motion to direct counsel to resolve litigation as discussed in executive session. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded again by Dr. Hartwells. All in favor to direct counsel to resolve litigation as discussed in executive session. We've had a request for a roll call vote in this one. I will call your name and please share what your vote is. Vice President Werner.
Regarding CB 2022-007839, it's something that's Googleable in public. I would hope that a board would never treat parents with such disgrace that they did during this board meeting. I was one of those parents on that call on August 24th, and was not able to speak due to the decisions that were made.
What's your vote?
With that, it is not appropriate for me to vote on this, so I will abstain.
Dr. Hartwells.
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay.
Aye.
Board Member Carney.
Abstain.
And Julie Sanowski votes yes as well, so that motion passes 3-0. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Number 48 Governing Board. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Hartwells. All in favor to adjourn this meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 9:50 PM.